What up, gamers? Today on Dice and Dragons, I am flying solo because currently I'm the only one that's gone to play the game. It's a game that I've played at a couple of my game nights, and I wasn't the one to bring it, so we're not going to be doing a full review on how to play, but just giving you my first impressions on the game. And the game that we're talking about today is Street Masters by Blacklist Games. The game is designed by Brady and Adam Sadler, and these designers are behind the upcoming Brook City. They've also worked on Warhammer Quest from Fantasy Flight Games, and they've also redesigned Warhammer Quest as Heroes of Terranoth, which is an upcoming cooperative card game that we should see later on this year. So as you can see, these guys have done a lot of really cool and awesome cooperative games. Now let's talk a little bit about Street Masters. Now it is a 1 to 4 player cooperative game, and it plays within about 45 to 120 minutes, so about 2 hours. In the game, you're going to be controlling a fighter and doing your best to defeat the martial artists, the big bad, and their minions while you're trying to retake that stage for the good of the world. Now, just to explain why we're doing it for the good of the world, about 5 years ago, the organization known as the Kingdom, which is divided into demon ninjas, your traditional triads, and things like that now, they were not viewed as a bad entity at the time. They held a world-renowned martial arts tournament, but it was a cover. They were trying to recruit fighters to their militia or enslave them. Now a bunch of them got away, and we are now 5 years later where the Kingdom has actually taken over sections of the world. The world governments have put together a project called Project Street Masters, and sending some of the world's best fighters to retake the streets and defeat the Kingdom. Now as you can see, the game has got a story straight out of your old school fighting games such as like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. I'd say that also the mechanics and the gameplay have a little bit of Streets of Rage and some of those other side-scrolling fighters put in there as well. Suffice it to say, if you're looking for a tabletop experience that is part fighting game, part side-scrolling game, this may be, or is most likely definitely the game for you. So as we always like to do here on Dice and Dragons, we're going to grab our drink. And as I'm by myself, I'm going to grab my weapon because I must defeat evil. And for those of you that have played Power Stone, you know why I picked the tennis racket. I'm going to be kicking some ass, John McEnroe style, so keep it right here. Now we're going to talk about Street Masters, and since I don't have the game to really display, I'm going to only briefly sort of explain the mechanics and how you set it up. First, what you're going to do is you're going to pick a stage. The stage is going to be the board that you will be playing on. Now, currently you only use one board. Each stage has their own separate board. There is also conditions that come with the stage that have to be met. They could be special abilities to help you beat the boss, or objectives that you need to keep the boss and their minions away from. You will pick the organization that you're fighting, such as maybe the Golden Dragon, which if I'm not mistaken, represent your more traditional triads. Then you're gonna pick also the boss character related to them. And the boss is a very strong martial artist with special abilities. Then the heroes are going to pick their fighters. Now the way things are going to work is the heroes have a fighter card and a deck of cards that they draw from. Now there are three types of cards in the deck of cards. There is attacks, abilities, and techniques. Ideally you want to get all of your techniques played because those are cards that are going to give you abilities that you can use constantly during your turn, and that's very important because movement is something that you can't be broken up in this game. So you can move up to 3 spaces, but you can't move 2, take an action, then move 1, for example. Techniques can potentially give you more movement, different ways to attack and move, so they're very important. Then you also have your attack cards, which will let you maybe attack up to 2 times because you're always allowed to play 1 card during your turn. So an attack and an ability can be played in conjunction with in conjunction with your regular attack, which is you just triggering what's known as a card action. Now there's some handy turn cards. I don't have one because, like I said, don't have the game. That will detail everything that you can do in front of you. And while you're doing this, just to explain the other interesting mechanic is during the start of your turn, you're always going to draw a threat card from the enemy deck, and that minion will if you draw a minion, for example, there are some things that you may draw which will affect the boss. Will be placed then in front of you if it's a minion and will only activate on your turn, which really leads to some interesting cooperative elements, as some players have abilities that may let you exhaust, meaning pinning a minion so they can't attack or something along those lines, to really let you guys have a chance to control the board, beat up on the boss, but not take too much damage from the minions that they have on the board. And that's really what you're doing. So in the course of the game, you have the boss set up on the board, you're constantly drawing threats, you're trying to manage those threats while beating the boss and fulfilling the conditions of the stage. Now, what do I think of the game? I really enjoy the game. I grew up playing old school fighters. I love playing Streets of Rage. I used to always play the female characters because typically they were some of the faster characters, and I love being able to hit fast and do more combos than anything else. And Street Masters, in terms of the characters, definitely replicates that. I play the character of Megan, who has some very cool defensive abilities, and then once she gets going, gets some really fast, cool movement abilities that she's able to trigger. They hit a lot of different enemies on the board, and I really enjoyed that. I've also played the character of Gabriel, who's more of your typical fighter. He has some great area control abilities, able to lock down enemies, and can also potentially move and even move enemies into certain positions. So he's a great complementary fighter. And the one thing that we didn't talk about actually is the fact that your fighters have the ability to power up and the way that they actually defend. So I'll talk about that right now. So what happens is you have defense tokens and you have different kinds of attack. You've got punch, kick, and grapple. Your fighter's card will tell you what type of damage you deal, and then you have different ways of gaining defense tokens. When an enemy attacks, it will tell you what type of damage they deal. You flip over a defense token if you have any of a corresponding value, and then it turns into power. When you accumulate enough power, your character powers up and is able to do sort of a super special ability. Some heroes are able to power up more often, as their abilities may be a little bit weaker but can still be very strong. Other characters will take a lot more power to power up. Now, the way the enemies attack you is you will follow the activation on their card, and enemies always hit. You really just roll damage, and then you will basically defend based on the defense tokens that you have available to you. There are a variety of ways that you get defense tokens. The primary way that every character gets those tokens is by attacking. You will roll the dice. You have when you make an attack. For most characters, it starts at 2 die. You then have the symbol to hit and a shield for defense. There's also the ability to crit. I'm not going to really explain that, but whenever you roll a shield, you gain a defense token of the type of damage you're dealing. So if it's just your basic attack from your character, it would be the damage listed on your character card. If it's from an ability, that may be a punch or grapple or a kick, depending on what ability you're playing or what attack you're playing, you would then gain defense of that type. And what I really like about Street Masters is it's very cooperative, and all the characters play very differently. And I never once feel when I'm playing the game that we're actually going to win. It's only as we start playing and we get a handle on things and characters start to level up and we really realize how to play the characters together that we sort of have a chance to win. There's a lot of really impressive things that can be done. For example, one of my friends was playing a character that does a lot of debuffs, and by triggering all the debuffs that he placed on the boss and based on our positioning, we were actually able to do a massive amount of damage on the boss, probably dealing almost 80 damage in one single character turn. You might think that's a lot when you hear 80 damage, but considering the fact that this boss had 50 health at the start, and when we flipped him over, he had another 100 health. We only really did about half his life in that series of attacks. And we were still facing multiple threats on the board, because if we're attacking the boss, we're not attacking their minions. And it is very difficult and challenging to hit the boss and also defeat minions. My first game, actually, I didn't even really engage with the boss. I ended up really being more of like crowd control, where my character was moving around the board, stunning and defeating minions, giving the other people that I was playing with a chance to beat up on the boss. And if you've ever played a game, not so much a fighting game like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, a game like Streets of Rage or Turtles in Time, TMNT, which is one of the classic beat 'em ups. And a lot of the villain fights, you're fighting the boss and there's constantly enemies coming in and out, and Street Masters captures that feel very well. So it makes sense that while some people are beating up on the boss, others will have to sort of handle the minions, something that I saw a lot specifically in TMNT. Now there's a whole lot of other games, and I'm just drawing a blank on some of them. I remember a classic one with two guys from Sega Genesis wearing, one brother was blue, the other one was wearing yellow, and we're going around beating them up. If somebody remembers the game, please mention it in the comments below. It also has very much a Double Dragon feel to it as well. But when you're looking at characters' abilities, the combos, and some of the moves, it definitely has that feel of a Mortal Kombat or a Street Fighter. Now, I think I've gone through enough of just sort of how you're going to play the game. I've talked a little bit about my first impressions. I really enjoy the game. I think this is a game that if you like fighting games, specifically if you like the side-scrolling fighting games, when the game comes back to Kickstarter in October, you should definitely look at picking this up. I'm not sure what's going to be included in the Kickstarter. I'm hoping we're going to get a reprint of everything from the first run, because that'd be awesome. I really want to get everything for this game because I feel that because of the different types of characters, some characters are your straight up fast characters, others can be more debuff oriented, some are just strong bruisers. Getting everything with the game is going to add a lot of variety, and I don't think you're ever really going to be playing the same game twice. I think you can if you pick all the same characters, but with what's in the box, there's going to be a lot of different combinations and a lot of replayability. So this is a game that I recommend, as this is really our first impressions. I don't want to give it a number score, but I will. This is a game that I will play again. This is a game that I want to add to my collection for the moment. We'll see if that changes as I get a chance to play it more, but I think we're done here. So as always, here on Dice and Dragons, you can find links to our other videos popping up above my head right now or shortly. You can find information about all of our social media feeds down below in the video description. And as we always do here, we're going to grab our drink. But in the case of Street Masters, it's grabbing our weapon. We're going to hit the streets, and we're going to take care of the bad guys, vigilante style. So hope you enjoyed our review, and keep it right here for some more upcoming reviews. Well, sorry, this is not our review, our first impressions. And don't forget, keep playing games.